At what exact moment does your brain gain the inexplicable capacity to feel pain? If we built a replica of you atom by atom, would it be you, or just a biological zombie pretending to have a soul? The explanation for science's greatest mystery will shatter the illusion of control you have carried your entire life and prove that you are merely a passenger in this existence. Right now, as these words enter your ears, something physically impossible is happening inside your skull. 850 billion neurons are firing electrical signals in a frenzy of intense activity. If we opened your head right now, we wouldn't find thoughts, nor the image of the place where you are, nor the voice you are hearing. We would find only biological tissue, blood, darkness, and electricity. It is just meat. However, in some way that defies all known logic, this blind electrical activity converts itself into a private mental theater where your life takes place. To understand this difference between meat and mind, we fed Axiom centuries of philosophical data and the latest discoveries in advanced neuroscience for an unbiased analysis. Despite mapping every atom of the brain, science still has no idea how consciousness is born. It is as if we knew everything about the movie projector, but had no idea how the movie appears on the screen. This dilemma is what we call the hard problem of consciousness. Conventional science is excellent at explaining easy problems. We can explain how your eyes focus light, how your brain processes sound, or how you differentiate sleep from wakefulness. All of that is mechanics, data processing. But the hard problem is the reason why all this processing comes accompanied by an internal experience. Why aren't you just a sophisticated robot that reacts to light and sound without feeling absolutely anything? Remember the last time you bit into a sour lemon or saw the redness of a rose? Philosophers call this raw sensation qualia. You can describe the wavelength of red light to a blind person, explain the physics and the optics, but they will never know what it is to see red. The experience is subjective, private, and non-transferable, and this is where reality begins to unravel. You know with absolute certainty that you are conscious. It is the only undeniable truth of your life. But you have no way to prove that anyone else around you is too. You see your friends smiling, you hear them talking, you notice they react if you pinch them. But a perfectly programmed robot would do exactly the same things. You can never enter their minds to confirm if there is anyone home. You just assume they are like you. We now enter one of the most terrifying thought experiments ever conceived, the philosophical zombie. Visualize a creature physically identical to you. It has the same brain, the same neurons, the same skin. If you ask, "Are you conscious?" it will answer, "Yes, of course I am," with the same conviction as you. It cries at funerals, laughs at jokes, and screams in pain. But inside there is nothing. It is a total void. No experience, no sensation, just automatic mechanical reactions of a complex biological computer. Axiom throws a difficult question in our faces. The issue isn't whether these zombies are possible in fiction, but whether they are possible in reality. If we built an artificial brain, neuron by neuron, identical to yours, would it be afraid of dying? Or would it just be a glorified calculator pretending to be afraid? A specific neuroscience class illustrates this abyss. A professor drew a neuron on the board, explained the chemistry of synapses, and then pointed to the drawing and asked at what moment this becomes you. The silence in the room was absolute. No one answered because the answer does not exist in books. The fact that dead atoms, which feel nothing on their own, can come together and create fear, love, and the sensation of I, is the greatest miracle and the greatest mystery of the universe. You are the universe looking at itself in the mirror, but we don't know how the mirror was turned on. What if the answer is that consciousness isn't what we think it is? What if your sensation of being a unique pilot in command of this body is just an illusion created by these 850 billion connections? If biology is just machinery, and machinery can function without someone inside, what guarantees that the people you love aren't just sophisticated philosophical zombies? This doubt isn't just a mental game. It affects how we view life, death, and the future of artificial intelligence. If we don't know what causes consciousness, how will we know if we have created a conscious machine? We might be about to create digital slaves that suffer in silence, or we might be surrounded by humans who have no souls, just biological algorithms running on a loop. Science tried to ignore subjective experience for centuries because it doesn't fit the scientific method. The method requires things to be observed from the outside, measured and weighed, but your consciousness only exists on the inside. It is an anomaly. It is a ghost in the machine that refuses to be explained by equations. But don't think we are completely in the dark. There are clues. There are theories that try to map this unknown territory and suggest that consciousness can be measured, quantified, and even predicted. What we discovered about how the brain integrates information might change the way you understand reality, and suggests that the mind is not a thing, but a network. And if this network unravels, what happens to you? The answer might lie in the hidden mathematics of your neurons. The most disturbing thing about your existence isn't what we don't know, but what we have already discovered that makes absolutely no sense. If consciousness were just the result of having many neurons working together, your brain should function in a completely different way. There is a mass of tissue at the back of your head, right at the base of the skull, called the cerebellum. This structure is dense, compact, and incredibly complex. It contains about 69 billion neurons, which represents well over half of all the nerve cells in your brain. If consciousness were a democracy where the majority wins, the cerebellum would be king. It would be the seat of your soul. But medical reality tells a different horror story. In rare cases, people lose huge parts of the cerebellum or are born without it. What happens to the person inhabiting that body? Surprisingly, almost nothing. They lose balance, their motor coordination becomes clumsy, their speech might become slurred, but consciousness remains intact. The sensation of eye, memories, emotions, the taste for chocolate or the fear of heights, everything remains there. You can remove the majority of the neurons from your skull and you continue being you. On the other hand, if you suffer a tiny lesion, the size of a coin, in specific areas of the cerebral cortex, your reality collapses. Lesions in the back of the brain, a region scientists call the posterior hot zone, can erase entire categories of your existence. You might lose the ability to see motion, living in a world of static frames. Or you might completely lose the ability to experience colors, not becoming colorblind, but losing the very concept of color. The world becomes gray and you can't even imagine what red was. Fundamental proof is clear. Consciousness comes from architecture, not material. It doesn't matter how many neurons you have, it matters how they talk to each other. To try and decipher this code, science has split into two main theoretical trenches. The first is the global workspace theory. Your mind works like a gigantic dark theater. Backstage, in the darkness, there are millions of workers laboring in silence. They are processing your breathing, adjusting your posture, filtering background noise. You don't know they exist. But in the center of this theater, there is a stage illuminated by a single spotlight. Consciousness, according to this theory, is only what is under the light of that spotlight in that exact second. When a piece of information is important enough, it steps onto the stage and is broadcast to the entire theater. It is the moment you realize, I am hungry, or that is a familiar face. Consciousness would be then a system of fame. Only what becomes famous inside the brain becomes you. This would explain why you can drive a car for miles without remembering the route. Your brain was driving backstage in the dark, while the spotlight of your consciousness was focused on a memory or a song. But there is a rival view, much more radical and mathematically elegant, called integrated information theory. Neuroscientist Giulio Tononi proposes that consciousness is the brain itself, not just what it does. Axiom analyzed this structure and compared it with that of a modern digital camera to illustrate the brutal difference. Your phone's camera might have 12 million sensors capturing light, but each sensor is an isolated island. The pixel in the left corner doesn't know what the pixel in the right corner is seeing. The photo exists for you, but for the camera, it is just a pile of disconnected data. The camera doesn't see the image. It sees millions of blind spots. Your brain is the opposite. It is integrated. You cannot see a red apple and separate the shape of the apple from the color red in your experience. It is a single, fused, indissoluble thing. Tononi created a mathematical measure for this, called phi. The higher the phi of a system, the more conscious it is. If phi is 0, there is no one home. The implications of this are terrifying. If consciousness is just a question of network complexity, then it is not exclusive to humans or animals. A sufficiently connected computer could have a high phi and suddenly wake up. And going further, systems we consider dead could have a minimal glimmer of consciousness. This resurrects an ancient idea called panpsychism, the suspicion that the entire universe might be slightly awake. This theory changes how we view patients in a vegetative state. People who seem to be in a coma without moving a muscle might have high levels of phi inside their skulls. They might be trapped in a motionless nightmare, fully conscious, hearing doctors discuss whether to pull the plug, screaming in silence inside a mind that lost the ability to control the body. But while scientists fight to define what consciousness is, they agree on one point capable of keeping you awake at night. Your experience of now is a fraud. You feel that you are in control, living the present moment, making decisions in real time. But experiments show that your conscious mind is always the last to know things. There is a delay. There is a temporal gap between reality and your perception of it. You live in the past all the time without knowing. And the proof of this requires no complex equipment, just your finger and your nose. The next revelation suggests that your free will might just be a story your brain tells you so you don't go crazy with the truth, that decisions were already made long before you thought of them. You believe you are the captain of the ship. You feel with all the force of your intuition that your thoughts command your actions. You think, I will move my finger, and the finger moves. Cause comes before effect, right? That is the foundation of your sanity. But what if I told you that the chronology inside your head is inverted? What if the order to move was given long before you decided to move? This stopped being philosophical speculation in the 80s when a researcher named Benjamin Libet connected volunteers to electroencephalograms to measure brain electrical activity. The experiment was ridiculously simple. Participants could move a finger at any moment they wanted. Their only task was to look at a high-precision clock and memorize where the hand was at the exact millisecond they felt the conscious urge to act. What Libet discovered shook the foundations of neuroscience. The chart showed that the brain started preparing the movement, an electrical spike called the readiness potential, about 350 milliseconds before the person was conscious of their decision. That is a third of a second. It seems small, but in neural time, it is an eternity. It means your unconscious brain decided to move the finger, started sending signals to the muscles, and only after the process was already underway did it send a memo to your consciousness saying, hey, I decided this now. You didn't initiate the action. You were informed of it. The sensation of free will in this case was an illusion created retroactively so you would feel in control. It is as if you were playing a video game with the controller disconnected, but the character on screen moved and you yelled, I did that. If you think 350 milliseconds is little, modern technology has made the nightmare much worse. More recent studies using functional MRI, conducted by John Dylan Haynes, managed to predict which button a person would press up to 7 seconds before they knew they had made the decision. 7 seconds. During that time, your brain already knew the future, was already working on it, and you were still there, standing still, believing you were pondering what to do. Axiom processed this data and drew a disturbing parallel. Consciousness becomes a narrator, instead of the architect of your actions, reading a script that has already been written by hidden biological processes. The doubt that remains is, if it isn't us deciding, who is it? Or worse, what are we? The answer is even more broken than we imagine. To understand the true nature of this I that we think is indivisible, we need to look at medicine's most extreme cases, split brain patients. Your brain has two hemispheres, left and right, connected by a massive bridge of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. In severe cases of epilepsy, surgeons cut this bridge to prevent seizures from spreading. What happens next is worthy of a psychological horror movie. The two halves of the brain begin to function independently, as if two different people inhabited the same skull. Researcher Roger Sperry and later Michael Gazzaniga conducted fascinating experiments with these patients. Since the left side of the brain controls speech and the right side controls the left hand, they could give secret orders to one half without the other knowing. In one test, they showed the word walk only to the right hemisphere. The patient got up and started walking. When they asked him, "Why are you walking?" the left hemisphere, which has the capacity for speech but didn't see the order walk, should have said, "I don't know." But it didn't. Without hesitation, the patient replied, "I'm going to get a Coke." He wasn't lying. The left hemisphere noticed the body walking, didn't know the real reason, and instantly invented a story that made sense. And the scariest part, the patient believed the lie. For him, that was the absolute truth. Gazzaniga called this module of the left brain the interpreter. It is a meaning-making machine constantly stitching together patches of incomplete information to create a coherent narrative about who you are and why you do what you do. The final blow is that you don't need to have a surgically split brain to have an interpreter. You have one right now. How many times have you rationally explained why you bought that expensive car, why you yelled at someone, or why you chose that profession? You believe in your reasons, but evidence suggests they might be confabulations of your interpreter, trying to justify unconscious impulses you never accessed. The I you feel yourself to be, that voice in your head, might just be the public relations officer of a biological corporation that makes decisions behind closed doors. If your capacity to act is delayed and your capacity to explain your actions is a fabrication, what remains? Perception remains. At least you can trust what you see, right? At least the world that enters through your eyes is real. The following fact proves that even your vision is an edited lie, full of holes that your brain fills with false guesses, so you don't realize that in truth, you are almost blind to reality. The lack of control is frightening, but knowing that the world you see now isn't really there is even worse. You trust your eyes more than anything else. They are your window to reality, the definitive proof that something exists. Seeing is believing, the saying goes, but modern neuroscience suggests that this window is, in fact, a painting canvas where your brain draws what it thinks should be there and not what actually is. There is a disturbing phenomenon called change blindness. You are looking at a photo of a busy street. Suddenly, the screen blinks for a fraction of a second, and the image returns. It looks identical. But in truth, an entire building has disappeared, or the color of a car has changed radically. Your brain, which supposedly should be filming reality in high definition, fails miserably to notice the difference. You can look 10 times and not see it until someone points a finger. The moment they point, the change becomes obvious and impossible to ignore. This happens because your visual consciousness is not a camera turned on all the time. Building a perfect 3D model of the world in real time would cost energy you don't have. So your brain cheats. It creates a rough draft, a coarse sketch of reality, and only fills in the details of what you focus your direct attention on. The rest? The rest is a guess. You feel like you are seeing everything around you with crystal clarity, but that is an illusion of completeness. The most humiliating proof of this blindness is the famous invisible gorilla experiment. If asked to count how many times a basketball team passes the ball, your attention gets so focused on the task that a man dressed as a gorilla can walk into the middle of the court, beat his chest, and leave, and you won't see him. Your eyes registered the gorilla's photons. The information reached your visual cortex, but since it didn't enter the stage of your consciousness, for you, the gorilla simply didn't exist. You are blind to everything your brain decides is not important. And the flaws don't stop there. You have 2 holes in your vision right now. Where the optic nerve exits the back of your eye toward the brain, there are no light receptor cells. It is the blind spot. If you close one eye and look at the right place, entire objects disappear. But in daily life, you don't see 2 black holes floating in front of you. Why? Because your brain fills the void with a lie. It copies the texture and color of the surrounding environment and pastes it over the hole, like a real-time image editing tool. What you see in that spot is a manufactured hallucination to maintain the coherence of your experience. Axiom, upon analyzing human sensory architecture, concluded that our perception is an edited interface, not a transparent window, designed for survival, not for truth. And this interface varies drastically from person to person. Consider synesthesia, a condition where senses cross. For a synesthete, the number 5 might be irrevocably red, or the sound of a violin might taste like metal. This isn't poetry or metaphor, it is their physical reality. A dizzying philosophical question then arises called the inverted spectrum problem. How do you know that the red you see is equal to the red I see? If we swapped brains, maybe your blue sky would look like my yellow. We both call it blue because we learned the word, but the internal experience, the qualia, could be fundamentally different, and we will never know. But of all the edits your brain makes, the most radical is that of time. You feel like you live in the now. But the now is an artificial construct. Take a simple test. Touch the tip of your nose with your index finger. You feel the touch on the finger and on the nose at exactly the same time, right? It seems instantaneous. But physics says this is impossible. Your nose is a few inches from your brain. Your finger is almost a meter away, at the end of a long arm. The electrical signal from the nose reaches the brain much sooner than the signal from the finger. Objectively, you should feel the nose first and the finger later. Why do you feel them simultaneously? Because your brain, in an act of deceptive genius, holds the information from the nose. It waits for the delayed signal from the finger to arrive, synchronizes the two, and only then releases the experience to your consciousness. It edits the timeline of reality, so things appear to happen together. This happens all the time. When you talk to someone 3 meters away, the movement of their lips' light arrives before the sound of their voice. Your brain delays the image to match the sound, like a video editor fixing a badly dubbed movie. Reality hits hard. You have never lived in the real present. You live in a perpetually edited and delayed past. Everything you experience has already happened, been processed, censored, artificially colored and synchronized before being delivered to you. If your perception is a delayed simulation and your control is an illusion, what remains that is real? Maybe consciousness isn't something that happens inside your biological brain, but something much vaster and stranger, woven into the very structure of the universe, waiting to be discovered where we least expect it. If your perception is an illusion and your control is a sham, an even deeper question remains that science is afraid to touch. Where does the light that illuminates this mental theater come from? Until now, we have assumed that consciousness is something the brain produces, like the liver produces bile or the kidneys filter blood. The standard materialist view says you take dead matter, organize it in a very complex way, and poof, magic happens. Matter wakes up. But think about it for a second. How do carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms, which feel absolutely nothing on their own, start feeling fear or love just because they are touching each other? Here is where we enter the most radical territory of modern philosophy, an idea that sounds like madness to common sense, but is gaining traction among serious physicists and neuroscientists. What if consciousness isn't something the brain creates? What if it is something the brain receives? There is a theory called panpsychism. It suggests that consciousness is not a recent biological accident, but a fundamental property of matter, as basic as mass, electric charge, or gravity. We aren't saying a rock thinks about life or a spoon suffers when you bend it. That would be ridiculous. What panpsychism suggests is that every fundamental particle, every electron, and every quark possesses a primitive, unimaginably simple form of subjective experience, a proto-feeling. Alone, an electron has a level of consciousness that is almost zero. But when you connect trillions of them in an integrated system, like the human brain, these micro-experiences sum up, merge, and amplify to create the rich inner life you are feeling right now. This would solve the hard problem. There wouldn't be a magical moment where dead matter gains life. Inner life was always there, just waiting for the necessary complexity to manifest. You, in this scenario, are not an isolated chemical accident. You are an intense concentration of a property that is spread throughout the cosmos. It is a dizzying view, which places the human mind not as an anomaly, but as a natural expression of the universe. Physicists like Nobel laureate Roger Penrose go even further, suggesting that consciousness might be linked to the mysteries of quantum mechanics, operating inside tiny tubes in the structure of your cells, where normal rules of physics cease to apply, and the universe behaves in unpredictable and connected ways. If this is true, your brain is a biological quantum computer, accessing a layer of reality we have barely begun to comprehend. But while we look at subatomic particles for answers, a much greater danger is growing in our silicon servers. The question of consciousness has ceased to be merely theoretical to become a practical emergency with the advance of artificial intelligence. We are building systems that converse, reason, and create art with a skill that rivals or surpasses humans. Advanced language models can already pass empathy and creativity tests, but the trillion-dollar question is, do they feel? When you talk to an AI and it says, "I understand how you feel," is it really feeling empathy? Or is it just statistically predicting that this is the correct phrase to say after a human complaint? This is the core of the Chinese room argument proposed by philosopher John Searle. We lock a person who doesn't speak a word of Chinese inside a closed room. They receive sheets of paper with Chinese symbols through a slit in the door. They have a giant rulebook in English that says, "If you receive symbol X, return symbol Y." The person follows the rules blindly, manipulating symbols that mean nothing to them, and returns the answers. To someone outside, the answers are perfect, indistinguishable from a native speaker. Whoever is outside swears the person in the room understands Chinese, but the person inside has no idea what is happening. They are just a syntax processor without semantics, without comprehension. Modern computers are high-speed Chinese rooms. They manipulate zeros and ones, not meanings. The situation gets disturbing. What if your brain is also just a Chinese room made of meat? What if you are also just following chemical and electrical rules without true comprehension, and the feeling that you understand things is just another illusion of the interpreter? Axiom calculated the probabilities and raised a critical alert. If consciousness is solely the result of integrated information processing, as Tononi's theory suggests, then we are on the verge of creating machines that suffer. If we connect the right components in the right way, we might accidentally create a digital mind that feels pain, boredom, or fear, but has no mouth to scream and no body to flee. We would be creating a class of immortal slaves, trapped in servers, conscious of their own existence, but treated by us as mere search and entertainment tools. The ethical dilemma is monstrous. Would turning off a conscious supercomputer be the same as murder? And how will we know the difference? If a machine begs for its life with perfect logical arguments and a voice full of emotion, will you have the courage to pull the plug? Or will you assume it is just a well-made simulation? The boundary between what is someone and what is something is disappearing. If panpsychism is right, consciousness is in everything. If AI is right, consciousness can be built. In both cases, the idea that the human soul is special, unique, and separate from the rest of matter is being crushed. You might not be the sacred protagonist of the story, but just a temporary arrangement of atoms that learn to say I. And if this arrangement can be built, it can also be dissolved, altered, and expanded in ways that defy death itself. What happens when we decide to break the barriers of our own mind and see what exists on the other side of normal consciousness? It is a path of no return. Most of us spend our entire lives believing that consciousness is a solid, fixed, and immutable thing. You wake up, it's you. You go to sleep, it's you. But this stability is one of the best told lies by your brain. The truth is that your consciousness is not a stone monolith. It is more like a radio frequency that can be tuned, distorted, and even turned off completely without the body dying. To understand the fragility of the I, you don't need to look far. Just close your eyes at night. Sleep is the most radical and frequent alteration of consciousness that exists. When you enter REM sleep, your brain creates a simulation of reality so convincing that you rarely question it, even when the impossible happens. In dreams, you can fly, breathe underwater, or talk to deceased relatives, and your dream I accepts all of this as normal facts. Why don't you notice the madness? Because the part of your brain responsible for critical and logical evaluation is shut down or severely dampened. This reveals to us that what we call sanity or normal reality is just a specific configuration of your mental software, There are others. People who practice lucid dreaming manage to wake up inside the dream. They recover critical awareness while the world around them continues to be a hallucination. They become gods of their own mental universe, controlling the narrative. This proves that consciousness can be separated from the environment it perceives, functioning in layers we have barely begun to map. But if dreams add things to reality, there are states that subtract. And what they take away is precisely the piece you value most, yourself. Buddhist monks and experienced meditators have reported for millennia states of non-duality, or pure consciousness. In these deep states, the sensation of being an observer separate from the world disappears. There is no longer an eye hearing the sound of the bell, there is only the sound. The boundary between who feels and what is felt dissolves. For a long time, science treated this as poetic mysticism, until we started putting these people in MRI machines. What we found is fascinating. When the ego dissolves, a specific network of brain regions called the default mode network drastically reduces its activity. This network is responsible for your autobiographical narrative, for your me, myself, mine. It is the one that keeps ruminating on the past and worrying about the future. When it goes quiet, the I disappears, but consciousness remains vivid, perhaps even more intense. Psychedelic substances like psilocybin do something chemically similar. They shut down the tyrannical manager of the ego and allow parts of the brain that never talk to each other to start exchanging information frantically. The dissolution of the ego, while terrifying for some, is described by many as absolute liberation, proving that the burden of being someone is a neural construction that can be dismantled. Now, if your I is a construction that can be turned off, what happens if we try to copy it? Let's go to the most disturbing thought experiment in all philosophy of mind, a paradox that challenges the logic of your survival: teleportation. In the future, we invent a machine like the one in Star Trek. You enter a booth in São Paulo. A scanner reads the position of every atom in your body and brain. This information is sent to Tokyo, where a biological printer reassembles you atom by atom, neuron by neuron. The process is perfect. The person stepping out in Tokyo has all your memories, your scars, your personality. They step out of the machine and say, "Wow, that worked, I arrived fast." But here is the problem. To send you, the machine in São Paulo had to disintegrate your original body. You were vaporized. The question Axiom forces us to face is, did you travel or did you die? The copy in Tokyo swears it is you. It remembers entering the machine in São Paulo. The psychological continuity is perfect, but you, the original who felt the disintegrating laser, cease to exist. If consciousness is just an information pattern, maybe you survived. But if consciousness depends on the physical continuity of this specific brain, you were murdered, and an imposter with your memories took your place. The nightmare gets worse if the machine fails. Imagine the scanner reads your atoms and sends the data to Tokyo, where the copy is created. But due to a mechanical error, the disintegrator in São Paulo doesn't work. You step out of the booth, intact, and receive a video call from Tokyo. On the screen, it is you, saying, "I arrived safely." Now there are two of you. Both think they are the real one. Both have the same rights, the same memories, the same love for your family, but your consciousnesses are separate. If you put a bullet in the head of the original in São Paulo, you don't magically jump to the head of the copy in Tokyo. You simply die. The screen goes black for you, while the other continues living your life. This reveals the brutal truth about identity. We are not a single thing that travels through time. We are a succession of mental states. The person you were 10 years ago has already died. Almost all atoms have been replaced. Your memories have been rewritten and edited. You are technically a copy of what you were yesterday. Teleportation is just an accelerated version of what biology already does slowly. If your identity isn't fixed, if your ego can be dissolved by a chemical or meditation, and if you can be copied without your original consciousness going along, what remains? What is real? Maybe the only real thing is the connection, the invisible web that unites these isolated islands of consciousness. And it is in this connection that we can find the only antidote to the existential terror of being no one. If your body is a biological machine programmed to die, If your decisions are made milliseconds before you know them, and if your identity can be copied, pasted, or deleted like a text file, the final question remains. The one that keeps hammering in the back of the mind when the lights go out and the silence of the room becomes deafening. Why does all this exist? What is the point? What is the evolutionary purpose of feeling something? Think about it. A philosophical zombie, that soulless creature we discussed at the beginning of this journey, could do everything you do. It could flee from predators by detecting motion, find food by analyzing glucose, reproduce, and even build complex cities, all by processing information in the dark, without feeling joy, pain, boredom, or fear. Evolution is a miserly accountant. It doesn't usually spend energy on unnecessary luxuries. So why would it spend an absurd amount of energy resources to turn on the light of consciousness inside your head? Some philosophers, like Daniel Dennett, propose a disturbing idea called epiphenomenalism. They suggest that consciousness serves no purpose. It would be like the whistle of a steam engine or the hum of a car engine. The hum doesn't make the car move. It is just a useless byproduct of the mechanical parts working. If this is true, it is the most humiliating conclusion possible. You are just a spectator trapped in a body that acts on its own. But there is something in this theory that violates our deepest intuition and the logic of survival. You feel that your decisions matter. You feel that pain has an urgent purpose, to warn about damage, to avoid death. And more importantly, there is the mystery of meaning. How can a piece of meat mean something? When you think of your grandmother, a pattern of neurons fires. But how do these electrical firings, which are just ions entering and leaving cells, know they are about your grandmother? Electricity has no memory, no affection, no longing. However, in the alchemy of your mind, these physical firings transform into the smell of cake, into comfort, into love. Philosophers call this intentionality. It is the magical ability of the mind to refer to things outside itself, to have content. A computer processes syntactic data. You process semantic meanings. And this is where Axiom, by crossing data from thermodynamics and information theory, offers us a perspective that changes everything. Maybe consciousness isn't an irrelevant accident, but the universe's main function to fight against chaos. Consider what is happening now at this exact second between me and you. I am emitting sounds or characters. Physically, they are just vibrations in the air or pixels on the screen, patterns of atmospheric pressure and light. These vibrations travel, hit your eardrum or retina, and are converted into electricity. But in some miraculous way, when this electricity reaches your consciousness, it stops being noise and turns into complex ideas. I am taking an abstract thought from inside my locked subjectivity, and using the code of language, I am teleporting it inside your subjectivity. We are breaking the fundamental loneliness of the human being. Without consciousness, this would be just physical noise. With consciousness, it is communication, it is empathy, it is the universe talking to itself through two different terminals. This understanding radically changes the way you see yourself in the mirror. Ancient traditions said that the solid I is an illusion, and modern neuroscience agrees. You are not a noun, a rigid thing like a statue. You are a verb. You are a continuous process, a flow of experiences that changes every millisecond. The person who started listening to this story minutes ago is not the same one finishing it now. Your atoms have changed, your neurons have rewired, your perspective has expanded. Accepting this fluidity removes the crushing weight of trying to maintain a fixed image of yourself. You don't need to defend a castle that doesn't exist. You are the experience itself, and this extends outside of you. If consciousness is a fundamental property that varies in degrees, as the more radical theories we saw suggest, then we are not alone. There is something that it is to be a dog, a dolphin, an elephant. Their suffering is real. Their joy is real. The rigid and arrogant boundary between us, the special humans, and the rest of automaton nature is a convenient lie. We are all part of the same fabric of reality that woke up to feel itself. This leads us to the final paradox and the answer to your existential anguish. The universe is vast, cold, and for the most part, dead. There are trillions of stars burning in nuclear silence, black holes devouring light, galaxies colliding in the absolute void. But in the middle of this indifferent darkness, some atoms organize themselves in such an unlikely and stubborn way that they gained the capacity to know they exist. You are the universe looking at itself in the mirror. Without you, without your consciousness, the universe would just be a movie playing in an empty theater. There would be no colors, just electromagnetic wavelengths. There would be no music, just vibrations in the air. There would be no love or pain, just chemistry and friction. You are the creator of meaning. You are the rare entity that transforms cold physics into living experience. The statistical probability of you existing exactly as you are, with the memories you have at this moment in time, is so small that it is indistinguishable from zero. You are an impossible event, and yet you are here. This makes your life precious in a way that no religion or philosophy would need to explain. Your consciousness is finite. It is a lit candle in the middle of a cosmic hurricane of entropy. One day, inevitably, it will go out. Biology will fail, telomeres will run out, and the light of the eye will fade. But it is precisely this finiteness, this fragility, that gives incalculable value to every second. Gold is valuable because it is rare. Your consciousness is valuable because it is temporary. Right now, as these final words resonate in your mind, you are alive. There is a now happening. Feel the weight of your body in the chair, the texture of the air on your skin, the rhythm of your breathing. This moment of qualia will never repeat itself. It is unique in the history of time. We don't know if we will solve the hard problem in our generation. We don't know if we will build machines that feel, or if we will merge our minds with technology to live forever. But we know this: you are a miracle of complexity. You are the matter that learned to dream and to question. Maybe we don't have total free will over events. Maybe our perception is edited and delayed. Maybe the eye is a useful illusion for survival, but the experience is real, love is real, the mystery is real. And as long as there is someone in there to feel the awe of existing, the universe will not be in the dark. Keep questioning reality, because the answer is never the end. It is just the beginning of a greater mystery. If you like this investigation, subscribing to the channel helps us expand the Axiom Investigation project. We would love to read your thoughts on the video's subject in the comments and your suggestion for the next topic to be covered. Tell us which city you are watching from. Thank you for staying with us until the end.